A session that's called How to Manage Applications at Scale and Innovate Faster with AWS. And we'll weave in fruit throughout the presentation because we couldn't do the fruit salad thing, so you're going to notice how we actually take advantage of that theme. I'm Anders, by the way. This is my colleague, Randall. We're going to be your co-host in this session and walk you through all the aspects of how you can model your environment according to applications and basically manage and operate your environment in a better way, in a simpler way. So what have we told? What have we heard? We went out to customers and asked them about what are the things that you think are problematic or challenging when you want to manage your AWS environment. And the first thing we heard loud and clear was, well, we think about our world as applications or business applications. We don't think about individual resources specifically. We don't really think in the terms of services. Our world is a business application that we need to operate. We need to understand what the cost of it is. We need to understand what the security posture of it is, et cetera, et cetera. And we're not really providing you a lot of tools that helps that. It's sort of like more focused on individual resources, or you need to figure out how to go and group them yourself in different ways and put them in place. So you think about business applications, we don't really help you with doing that. And the third part that we heard loud and clear was, you got to make it easy for our teams. We've got application developers, we've got the finance team, we've got the security team. Help us make life easier across the board for them. So what we're going to be covering in this session is something we call application operations. So we're announcing it, or if you want to call it, release it this week. There's a lot of services that actually support it. We'll get to that in a little bit. Randall is going to talk about one application model to rule them all. And essentially, we need the application model so that we can support the application operations story. And we'll get to those pieces further down in the presentation. And we're going to do demos. We're going to do quite a bit of demos to actually show this working so you can see all the pieces that we're talking about that we're introducing. So with that application experience, well, that's sort of what we're trying to tell the story of, well, what if I have an application that I only have to create once and define once, and I recognized across the services in AWS, and what if it even allows me to deep link into a service and it knows what application I'm actually working on, not forcing me to go and click and select again, right? It's basically an experience that is connected across the board. A different way of talking about it is its new capabilities. So we're enhancing existing services with the capability of understanding what an application is and allowing you to perform the actions that you need to do to run your day-to-day business on top of AWS. This week, there's a number of services. The key areas that we're focusing on providing you this experience is around costs, health and performance, your security posture for your applications. So in other words, you can create an application, and I'm going to now start using the fruit called banana, right? And you can use that banana, you can go into all these different areas and you can reference banana, and you can now view what the usage is and all the cost and all those kind of pieces. So application operations, what services support it? So we're going to start from the top and talk about application operations, what it is you can do. And then we'll go down in more and more detail to show how this actually works under the covers as well, so you can understand how we actually put this together. So the services you see on the list here, CloudWatch Application Insights, Systems Manager, Application Manager, Resilience Hub, and Service Management connectors, excuse me. They all support the notion of an application even before reInvent, but it was the only services that did so. What we're adding this week is Security Hub is becoming application aware, or is application aware actually. So what you can do now, you can go to Security Hub, and you can filter your security findings down to an application. So you could go to Security Hub and say, I want to see all the security findings for my application banana. And it might come back and say, I found there's 10 security findings, 2 high severity, 3 medium, and 5 low findings. And you can do that for all the applications that you have created. Secondly, we've enhanced Resource Explorer. We've added an operator in there, so it's search operator. So you can now go in and very easily basically ask it, show me all the resources for application banana. And we'll actually demo this later on exactly how it works. So now you can do, basically you put in operator : and then the name of the application. You will get back the list of resources associated with it, which allows you to centrally find all this stuff rather than trying to run around and look at all the applications that you have. On the cost management side, there's 3 services, or rather 4, there's one that's missing up here. Cost Explorer, budgets and cost and usage reports, and the cost anomaly detection capability as well, are all application aware. So in other words, I can go to Cost Explorer, select application banana, and see what the usage is. I can go to budget, select application banana, and set a budget for that application. Same thing, the applications will show up in my CUR. So now you have this information around the world, that how you're thinking about your world, the business applications you're running on top of AWS. A little bit of a teaser. I'll put a question mark here. I can't talk about it because it's being announced tomorrow, but there is a service that's going to be announced at Werner's talk tomorrow that will be application aware at launch. And you're going to see this in the future as well, as we come out with more and more things that are going to be served, more and more services we add under the umbrella of application operations. So make sure that you join Werner's keynote and listen to that. And this is one of the services. There's a service there they're going to talk about that you're really going to like. Okay, application operations. It's something that allows me to basically manage and operate on top of an application that I created. So how do I create an application? Well, at the hub, basically the center where your applications exist, or the Notion application exists, is something called App Registry. How many in the room, show of hands, know about App Registry? One hand. We're going to teach you today. Then we're going to have everybody raise their hand. So App Registry is sort of like the hub, the registry where your application will exist. And what you do is you create an application App Registry, and you associate your resources with that application. Randa will go into all the details of exactly what happens under the covers of that, so I won't talk to that much more. But having to go into App Registry to do this feels like I have to do an additional step. Like, and one of the things that you brought to us as a pain point was, don't make it more easy for our teams. Don't ask them to do additional stuff, right? So everything you see up here will automatically create an application in App Registry. You don't have to take that extra step. So if you use well-architected or any of the AWS solutions that you can download from the AWS website, a solution website, the Launch Wizard, the CDK, as well as CloudFormation, all can be used to automatically create an application that exists in App Registry that now will appear in any of the application operations enabled services to be able to select, right? So App Registry is the hub that everything rotates around. If we take CloudFormation, just quickly look at what it is. I wanted to show this. What you can do if you add this code, this snippet that's up here right now, to your template, what will happen is it will create the application for you in App Registry. The first red square just shows that whatever name you give the stack when it's being deployed will be the name of the application in App Registry. And it will automatically associate the stack and its resources with the application that the stack is creating. You put this in, and you can now go and create whatever EC2 instances and S3 buckets, whatever it is else you want to create. This automatically just sets it up for you and does the automation for you. You don't have to touch App Registry later on. It's all done for you automatically, right? So it's very neat. So to sum it up, busy slide, a lot of things in here, but this is really bringing together all the pieces I just talked about. There's the application operations services. There's the services to create. So we've pretty much covered the whole life cycle of an application, from migration through provisioning, organizing resources, managing cost, managing operations, up to the notion of monitor and observe. They are all application aware and help drive the application operation story that we just talked about. With that, let's jump into the first demo.
All right, thank you. All right, so let's see what this looks like. Today I'm going to walk you through 2 different demos. The first one is going to actually show you what application operations looks like in several of the services that Anders just described that are newly going to be supporting application operations this year. After that, I'm going to walk you through how you can centrally manage and perform some common operational tasks in Application Manager with Systems Manager. So to get started, I'm going to start this demo in a second. We're going to go through the banana applications, what we're going to be looking at in there. Right after doing these demos, I'm going to introduce you to the application tag. That's a brand new construct that ties all this together. We're going to talk about that in a second, but that's how all of these come together. So what you're looking at here, this is Security Hub. you're looking at a list of security findings within the account. As many of your accounts probably look like, there's a long list. You can see I'm just paginating through. There's a lot of security findings because there's a bunch of different applications that exist within the same account. But now with application operations, you can easily filter down these security findings to just the findings for a single application. In this case, it's the banana application, which was that long string that I just pasted in that I'll explain more in a second. So now there's only 19. So you've reduced it from that paginated list to just the 19 that you care about because they're for your application. For example, here's one of them that we could look at. This is an EC2 instance that doesn't have the latest version of the instance metadata store. You can see at the bottom it's C90 is the instance ID. We'll come back to that in the next demo. Moving along, this is CloudWatch, another service that you can do this in. I'm using the same identifier. It's application aware. And you're able to see the CPU utilization for all the EC2 instances that are only part of this application, not the rest of the account. And you can see that they're performing with less than 2% of CPU utilization. They're performing well. And then you can drill deeper and look at further metrics. Over in Cost Explorer, same thing. Like your Cost Explorer probably looks similar to this. There's a lot going on. There's 25 plus different services here across who knows how many different applications within the account, but you only care about one. So same way, we're going to filter down to just that single application, and you're going to get a much clearer view of what's going on. And here you can see that like just the resources that you're using, just the services that you care about for the banana application, your costs are consistent. So you can have a much clearer, easier to understand view of how your application is performing. If there's any security incidents that you need to be worried about, or if there's any cost changes to the resources in your application. So moving on to the next demo, this one's going to focus on Application Manager. Application Manager is a service that lets you see all the applications that are in your account. You can see them here. We're going to click on the banana application, which is the same one we just looked at before. And this view is an at-a-glance view that gives you like a high-level overview of any of the insights and alarms, the costs, compliance, logs, and then any operational items for that application. You can also go deeper into the different tabs that we're going to click on. Like this resources one shows all the different resources that are part of your application within the account. Instances shows the current state of any EC2 instances that are part of just that application. But in the compliance tab, which is what we're going to focus on, you see any of the compliance findings that are rolled up aggregated for this. And one of those you'll notice is the same instance metadata finding that we saw before in Security Hub for the same instance, the C90 instance. So I'm going to show you real quick how you can easily correct issues that you find like this in Application Manager. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to click on Manage Remediation. It's going to take us to this list of runbooks that we're going to be able to search for. And a runbook is just a preset list of tasks and actions that will be automatically executed to correct things in an automated way. In this case, we found one that addresses the metadata issue, and we can very quickly see from the description that it actually addresses exactly what we needed to. We're going to get to the IMS v2. Here you can see that it outlines all of the different tasks and actions that it's going to perform for you, so you can verify that it's going to do the different steps that you need it to. So all that looks good. We're going to select it. Now we're going to configure it and set it for remediation. Because Application Manager knows which instances this should be applied to. You don't even need to apply the instance ID. You just need to tell it that's the parameter to look for, which is what I just did there. And then it grays out the instance ID field itself because it's going to pre-fill that for you. So with that, we've addressed that operational issue. But in order to make use of application operations, I want to talk about the application model and what you need in order to support it. But starting off, I'm going to talk about what an application is. So many of you probably have organized your teams around, you may call them applications, you may call them projects or workloads. Like these may be customer-facing websites, it could be transaction processing systems, or it could be machine learning data processing pipelines. Like collectively, like we're going to just refer to all of this as applications. And we're defining an application as a logical group of resources that together deliver business value. An application has a name, has a description, has a criticality to your business, and it also has underlying resources, but it's not tied directly to those resources. So for instance, if you had a transaction processing system that was an EC2 stack, that was deployed on, a Java stack deployed on EC2 instances. And then you later refactored that into a Python stack deployed on Lambda instead. That still is the same application. You've just re-architected it under the hood. And we want to make sure that our application model can support and recognize that. So as your applications have grown, as your business grows in complexity, you'll probably find that you have less clarity, less visibility into the cost of your applications. Maybe the operational posture of some of them gets harder. It increases the operational burden because there's just more going on. There's more that you have to track. But with application operations, by being able to focus, as we saw in the demos, as we saw what Anders was focusing on, and taking everything going on in the account and filtering it and focusing it to just this application and then maintaining that context in different services across AWS, you're going to be able to turn this into this. So rather than seeing all of the resources when you're in Security Hub, or all the findings in Security Hub, you're going to be able to look at security findings on an application-by-application basis instead of resource-by-resource. You're going to be able to look at your application resource costs instead of having to do it at a service level or by account. So some of the key requirements that you'd want in a model like this, you'd need there to be a simple and standardized definition of membership. You'd want it to be consistent across AWS services. You don't want to have to redefine it in multiple places. And you also want it to be consistent or uniform across however you deploy your resources. So if your teams are deploying them in the console, using APIs, SDKs, using the CLI, or using infrastructure as code solutions such as CloudFormation or Terraform, it doesn't matter. You want a model that supports those all equally, treats them all the same. And ours does. So we talked about App Registry. App Registry has been around for a couple years. One of the big things that we changed this year, 2 weeks ago actually, is we introduced the new AWS application tag. That's what's shown here. That's what's in the orange box. It's a little long. What you're really looking at is a standard tag key, AWS application, and then the value is just the ARN of this application. But with this standard AWS application key, or application tag, AWS services are able to consistently recognize that a resource belongs to a particular application. So there's now a single common definition of what is an application within AWS. So that allows you to define an application once and then use and reference that same application in Cost Explorer, in Security Hub, in CloudWatch, and other places that as they add support for application operations. App Registry, though, at its heart, it's plumbing. It's very simple. It's where you define your application. Ideally, many of the times, you may not even need to go to it. If you're using some of the solutions that Anders showed you, it's going to be automatically created in there. App Registry has that definition of the application, and this allows you to store some metadata around it. But that's it. Under the hood, though, App Registry is actually relying on another service called Resource Groups, where Resource Groups is actually a service that's been around for a while. It allows you to create a group of resources that are associated to that group based on the tags on those resources. And in this case, this is a special type of resource group that is using that application tag to associate a specific resource to that application. Because you can have a single tag with the same key on a resource can only belong to one application. That application tag is automatically enabled for cost allocation in all the billing systems, so you can use that out of the box. But because this is done in Resource Groups, which already supports grouping things into a hierarchy, you can have groups nested within groups and build out a hierarchy like that, you can actually model the different subcomponents within your application. So maybe that could be your front-end or back-end architecture. Maybe that's different environments. Maybe that's, in this case, your data pipeline versus your transaction processing infrastructure. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to Anders.
Let's see all this stuff in action. Everybody loves demos, right? By the way, there's going to be a test at the end of this, and the prize is going to be the fruit that I brought with me, so pay attention to what we're doing, right? So I'm going to be doing 3 demos. One, I'm going to create an application, and I'm going to, as part of the creation process, add a resource to it, just showing that simple step. Secondly, I'm going to manually add additional resources to that application I created in demo 1. So all these demos are build on each other, so to speak. But manually adding resources becomes error-prone, takes a lot of time, and you might want to avoid that. So I'm also going to show you how you can automate it so that whenever a resource gets created, it automatically gets added to an application. So those are the 3 demos we're going to go through. So as we talked about we'll start with the create application. As I talked previously, there's multiple ways you can create an application. You can do it through App Registry, you can use the CDK, CloudFormation, all these kind of tools. Just for sake of argument, given that App Registry is such central to this, I'm actually going to create it in App Registry. What you see here is Console Home, and you see there's an application widget. This exists today, so if you go to Console Home today, you'll find the widget. It might not be at the top, it might be at the bottom, but it will list all the applications that you have in your, that you've created in App Registry. And we're going to add a stack. I've got a stack here called Banana Stack that has 2 resources in it, an EC2 instance and a security group. So now we have the resource that we're going to add. So let's go to App Registry and walk through the workflow. Very simple. When you get to App Registry, you click Create Application. Of course, that's what we're going to do. We need to give it a name. We're going to stick with the fruit theme. We'll call it Banana. You can optionally put in a name, a description if you want to. I'll put in a description just because I like so. It's part of the fruit salad suite of applications. But now the important part comes in. There's an item down there that says Resource Collections, and you click that. Excuse me. Once you click on that, we say that we want to add a stack to this application. And it gives you a drop-down of available stacks. I'll select the Banana Stack that I showed you previously with the resources. Now, an important thing to note, there's a little thing that I'm circling here that talks about tagging of resources, and it's toggled on. It's on by default. And the reason it's on by default, what this does is puts this application tag that Randall talked about on all the resources in the stack as well. Right? So you're basically approving that. If you take that away, don't do that, then it means that all the stuff we talked about application operations, it's going to be hard for the services. They won't recognize if they're part of an application or not. So leave that on. So I created my application. You can see there's a stack in place. Let's go back to Console Home and see what it looks there. And let's do a refresh. And ultimately, the more applications you create, the more applications that will show up in Console Home. And you'll see Banana show up here. If I now select Banana, you can see it's a selectable link. What happens then? If you click on it, it will deep link into Application Manager that Randall demoed previously. And a good way of thinking about Application Manager, it's like a DevOps hub where you're on your daily business to manage and operate your application and its resources. And when you're in Application Manager, I'm going to click on Resources just to show that the resources are in there. It shows a little bit more of resources, not just the instance and the security group. You also see the resource groups that Randall talked about that we create under the covers, and you see the stack being in there. But ultimately, this is now my application. This is the application Banana, and I can now manage it. Let's go to the next demo. So I've now got my application created. I've added a stack to it as part of the workflow. That's hunky-dory. But I do know that in my organization, we've actually created more resources that are part of the application. We didn't use CloudFormation to deploy them. We used some other technology. The one thing that I do know is every single resource that we've got created that way have been tagged with project equals to Banana, right? It belongs to that project. So how can I easily add those resources into an application? So we start at the same thing. We start on Application Manager just to show, and here you see the list of resources that are part of it. So how do I find the resources that are tagged in a certain way so I can rework them? So one place to go to that you could do is to Tag Editor. And in Tag Editor, if I can get it to click, when you get to Tag Editor, when you get to Tag Editor, you can create a query that basically allows you to define anything that's tagged with project equals to, there we go, Tag Editor. We'll create a query that says, find me all the resources that are tagged with project equals to Banana. And we run that query to get the list. And I want to make sure that I get all the resources. I happen to know it's EC2 instances, but it could be other resources. So we select project. We select Banana as the value that we want to actually filter on. And we'll run the filter. And now you see what shows up. There's 4 instances. All have the name of banana front end, right? So I now want to add them in there. I'll select all the resources I want to add. In this case, it's all the resources. I click on Manage Tags. And what I'll click on now says Add Tag. Now, this is where the interesting part comes in. I want to add the application tag, the AWS application tag. I put in AWS application. I need the ID of the application. I get that from App Registry. There's a link you can copy that says application tag. We'll go back to Tag Editor. We paste in that link, that information. Once we pasted in that information, I go and click the button to basically get it enforced. I have to validate it, and now that tag sits on all the EC2 instances. So let's see what all the resources are that are part of my application. And we can use the application tag to see that list. So we'll stay with Tag Editor. We'll go back and create the new query, but this time AWS application. And same thing here, we'll paste in the application tag, application ID, and now you see the list is much longer, right? So now it has 5 instances, not 4, and 4 of those new, not 1, and the 4 of the new ones that we added are basically the front end service that we added. If we go back to Application Manager and do a refresh to see what the list of applications, the resources are in there, you'll see that the 4 instances now are in there, so there's 5 instances that are part of my application. So a very simple way of adding existing resources that you have into an application, right? We know that a lot of you that are in the room, you already have tagging strategies for tagging your resources, so you can take advantage of that and adding it into an application. Now, I mentioned previously that Resource Explorer is a mechanism for you to also find things. So we've enhanced that with the application operator. So let's take a quick look at that and see what that looks like. So we'll go to Resource Explorer, and you can see these are all the resources that are part of in my account right now. And if I go to the query and I put in application:banana, and let's see what comes back. And what you see actually gets listed as the same view that we've had previously. It's all the instances, it's the security group, it's the stack, et cetera, right? It's a very good way of actually getting all the list of all the resources. So I can do the same thing if I have other applications and see this information. So central place to actually be able to see what's part of my different applications I have. Well, how can I tell what applications exist? I have many accounts in my organization all over the place. So the thing you can do now is take advantage of the multi-account search capabilities that Resource Explorer launched a couple of weeks ago. And I'm going to go in and select the view that I created, a multi-account view. That's going to allow me to go in and create basically view and see applications across my accounts in my organization. So if I do, with the difference, what I do now is when I go into the query you will type in is the following: resource type, service catalog, applications, right? App Registry is part of the service catalog product family. When I type that in, what I actually get back is a list of 19 applications across all of my accounts in the organization that I play in, my little playground, right? So now I have a tool where I centrally can see all the applications that exist. And you can see here it's 19 of them. I can't see the names though, so I want to add that in so I actually can tell what the applications are, because otherwise I have no idea what they are. It's just a number. And you can do that by changing the configuration of the columns that you want to view. And if you look at it, at the bottom it says name, we'll put that in there. You now see all the beautiful application names that fruit names we have in our applications. So now I can centrally get a full list of all my applications in my organization. Requirement number 1, they have to be in App Registry. What I also can do, I can now centrally also list all the resources that are part of an application that sits somewhere in my organization, once again with the multi-account view. I selected Kiwi here first to try it out. It actually is one of those applications that doesn't have a single resource associated with them. You can create those applications if you want to. But in this case, if I go in and select watermelon, which I know is in a different account, what do I see? Well, I see 3 resources associated with it. So it's a very good tool. Now you don't have to run around in all the different accounts trying to figure out where do my applications exist, how many do I have, what are the resources part of a certain application, which normally this requires you to grovel through or keeping your own list of where all those resources exist and what you can do with them. So the third demo. So we created an application. As part of the application creation workflow, we added a resource. It was a stack. I added 4 resources manually based on the tag on the resources. Excuse me. However, having to add resources manually, it's time consuming. It means somebody has to do work around it. It also means that you're probably going to miss some resources, not in time, because you can't sit and add them manually constantly. So what we're going to do in this demo, we're going to show you how you can set up and configure your environment so when a new resource gets created, it's automatically added to an application without anybody having to lift a single finger for it to happen other than launching or creating the resource. The way we're going to make this work, there's 3 core technologies we're going to take advantage of. One is resource groups lifecycle, group lifecycle events. We're going to use Lambda. I'm going to use EventBridge. Show of hands, real quick. How many in the room are aware of something called resource groups lifecycle, group lifecycle events? 1 person. Are you guys in for a treat? Because this is an awesome thing. You can do a lot with this technology. So, what the group lifecycle event capability does, it allows you to define, you get an event whenever there's a change to a resource group. And that could be resource gets added, resource gets removed, resource group got created, resource group got deleted. And you can now build workflows around these events to do things, right? Something gets added, I might want to go and check that it's set up with encryption, or whatever the deal is that you want to go and make happen, right? So the flow that we're going to create, we're going to create a resource group, and we're going to make sure that whenever a new resource gets added to that resource group, we automatically are going to put that application tag that Randall talked about on that resource, which means it automatically ends up in an application. Right? So that's the flow we're going to go through. So the view you have here, this is a common one. We've seen it for a while now in a lot of the demos and the discussions we've had. It's Application Manager. It's a starting point for all the demos that we're doing. And you see the resources. There's 5 instances in here. There's the 4 that we added manually. It's the 1 that we had when we created the stack, added the stack in the application creation workflow. So the first step, or the first building block that we need to put into place, we need a resource group, right? And to do that, we need to go to resource groups to get it set up so we can configure it so that we know what resources are in it. I have a resource group pre-created. It's called Project Banana. Surprise, surprise, is another reference to a fruit. If you look at the query definition of it, it says it will automatically include all the resources that are tagged with project equals to banana, right? And if you look at the resource list, it has 4 instances in it. Remember, though, I actually did a query previously in Tag Editor that said I manually wanted to add anything that was tagged with product equals to banana. It's those 4 instances that are in place. So now I have the resource group, but that's not enough. I actually need to make sure that the group lifecycle event functionality is up and running and it actually is activated. And the way you do that is on resource group, there is a section up to the left that's called settings. And you have to go to settings and enable it. It's not turned on by default. You actually have to take a step to enable it. And you can see here that it actually is turned on. It basically says notifications are turned on. If your notifications are not turned on, the rest of the demo that I'm going to show is not going to function. Okay, first step, resource group created, notifications turned on. So anything now that happens in resource groups is actually now generating events over an EventBridge. The next step, we need a Lambda function. We need something that actually activates whenever the event comes up. And here's a Lambda function that I've created. I'm not going to go through all the details of it. We don't have time for that, unfortunately. But if you look at this, when you go to line 74, you'll see something that says AWS application. An AWS application, remember, that is the tag key that we want to apply. And what I need to do is I need to paste in the application ID of the application I want the resource to get added to. That's the application ID. Remember where I get the ID? I go to App Registry, I look up banana. Once again, I copy the information in the application tag, and I bring that with me back to the Lambda function, paste the value in there, and clean it up a little bit. And once that is done, I have to redeploy the Lambda function so that it actually gets active. Once it's redeployed, I actually now have two of the main puzzle pieces for this demo to function. I said I have the resource group, and I have the Lambda function that's basically going to put the tag on the resource when the resource gets added to the resource group. The last missing part is I need to go to EventBridge and create a rule that activates it. So let's go to EventBridge. In there's a button you can click that says Create Rule. I click that button. I'll give it a name just for sake of argument. I'm going to call it Auto Tagger because that's really what this is going to do. And you can put it in, that's where you can put in description. We're going to keep it by default, whatever other values are in there. The one thing that's interesting on the second page is we're going to go all the way to the bottom, and we're going to basically say it's a service event. And we're going to select the service from a drop-down. In this case, it's resource groups. Once we selected resource groups, we're going to select what type of events. We want all events to show up. In this case, we don't want the pieces. But at the same time, we also want to make sure that we're not triggering off the wrong things. For this specific rule, I want to filter only for when a resource gets added. So we're going to paste in the definition for the filter also in play. And as you can see in here, it basically says add. So this rule will trigger whenever there's a resource added to a resource group. So we've got the main functionality in place. The next thing we need to do, we need to have a target when the rule triggers. That's the next step that we need to go to. And we look at this, we need an AWS service. In this case, we select from a drop-down, we select Lambda. And what that allows us to also do is later on select the Lambda function we just talked about, the resource auto tagger Lambda function. And we click next, allows me to review it, and then I basically click enable, and now you have the rule that basically sets up this environment that we have. So we now have the core components in place. See the auto tagger rule. We have the resource group. We have set up events, so there's a rule that triggers whenever a resource gets added to the resource group. And we got the Lambda function that basically puts the tag on that the resource when it gets added. So let's see this in action. I'll go to EC2, and I want to create 4 more instances. So let's click on Create Launch Instances. And once I've clicked on Launch Instances, I can go in and basically add the values in here. And I'm going to add 4 instances. That's what I promised I would add in there. I'm going to give them a name so we can distinguish them. I'm going to call it Banana Front End 2, difference from the Banana Front End that we had previously created. But I'm also going to add an additional tag. I'm going to put product equals banana as an additional tag. Of course, I could put AWS application and the ID here if I wanted to. I would also add it in there, but I would be doing it manually in that case. I'll talk about that a little bit after this demo. Now, after this, I'll pretty much go in and stay with whatever's default just to simplify the demo. I'll click on Create to actually get them activated and created with these 2 tags on. And it takes a while, as usually, for instance, it shouldn't be that slow. So we've got the 4 instances created. If we now go back to the EC2 console and quickly look at what's been created, you'll see there's 4 instances. There's also a bunch of other instances here that you can see, but you see the 4 front end 2 that have showed up. If I now go back to my resource group that I created, Project Banana, and look at what are the resources in that resource group. And of course, given that we said Project Banana, you'll actually see 8 instances in there instead of 4. And you see from Banana front end 2 instances in place as well. And if you look at the far right side, there's a column that says number of tags. If we select that, click on that number for one of these front end 2 instances, you'll see the application tag is automatically in place. So this whole infrastructure that we just built up, with the setup we just set up, functions very nicely. Which means if I go back to Application Manager and we do a refresh, a lot of refresh on the Application Manager today, you'll see now instead of seeing 5 instances, there will be 9 instances in that list, right? So what I've walked you through to show you what actually exists is basically set up a world where, one, you create an application, and added resource to it. I showed you how you manually connect it. One of the reasons for showing the automation part as I did is I said I could put that application tag on it when I created the instances. Most of you in the room probably have some sort of tagging strategy already in place. And that tagging strategy has defined, you put product equals to banana, and you have some of your deployment pipelines, whatever technologies there are. With what I've just showed, you don't have to change those. You don't have to go in and change and suddenly put in the ID of the application. You can build this infrastructure and keep deploying your resources as you have done, but the resources will be added to an application based on its triggering this event, right? So now you're automating. So now we're getting back to, remember we started off with this whole discussion about what are we doing, what have we heard from customers. We've just shown you through application operations a lot of the simplicity of there's an application. You can get the experience around it. It's centrally, you manage it that way. But a lot of the things that I showed here in the demos are about simplifying for your teams, the application developers or the application DevOps team that actually need to work around various different things. With that, I think, Randall, I think it's up to you to bring us home.
All right, let us bring us home. So today we looked at a couple different things. We introduced application operations. I hope that was interesting. We talked about the new application tag. And what that allows us to do is define an application once in your account and then use it in any of the services that support application operations. We talked about how this is going to enable you to move faster at scale. Like, as you continue to grow in complexity, your operational burden should not need to as well. And this will allow you to, like, even as the number of applications you're working with grows, you can still focus your operations on just the application that you're working on so that you can maintain that context in the service that you're working in and then as you move to other services. Because then you can focus on your tasks at the application level instead of doing these resource by resource. And then with that, we showed you Application Manager as one of the services that helps you centralize these operational tasks. So what can you perform? How do you do it in a centralized way so that you don't need to go across many different places in the AWS console to complete common tasks? And how can you automate the completion of those tasks as well? And then that wraps up with where Anders showed you you don't even need to change how you're deploying your resources today. If you're already using a tagging strategy, you can use group lifecycle events as a trigger to automate adding your resources to the correct application using your existing tagging strategy to put it into the correct application with the right application tag on it. So if that was interesting at all, there's a couple other talks talked about it this week. Some of these have already happened. The top 3 were earlier in the week. After reInvent, these will all be posted online. You'll be able to go watch these if you're interested in learning more. The one highlighted in orange, that's this talk right now. So thank you for coming. We're happy to see you here. And then the 2 that I want to draw your attention to are the ones that we have going on tomorrow, particularly Dr. Werner Vogel's keynote. So if you have an opportunity to go there, do so. We have a really exciting announcement with application operations that we can't talk about yet, but we're going to be announcing tomorrow. So with that, we'll be here up at the front if you have any questions for us.
Thank you.